My wife, Jessica, and I tied the knot right after college. We had been together for 3 years before making it official, though I was a bit older than her. I had taken 2 years off to serve in the Peace Corps before starting college, so by the time we graduated, I was 3 years ahead of her. Both of our families were thrilled about the wedding, but I think Jessica's mom, Lisa, was the most excited. Lisa had never gotten to experience a traditional engagement or big wedding for herself. She had gotten pregnant as a teenager and, being raised in a strict religious household, was practically cut off from her parents when that happened. A few years later, she married an older man, Bill, for the financial stability she needed to raise Jessica. Although Bill was a good guy, responsible and reliable, he was the type who didn't care for romance. They had a simple, no-frills wedding, and Lisa missed out on the fairy tale many women dream of. Maybe that's why she was so invested in ours. Lisa and I always got along well. She wasn't much older than me, only 11 years, so she felt more like an older sister or a young aunt than the typical mother-in-law stereotype. And, honestly, she was just as pretty as Jessica. Lisa had these striking green eyes, and while she was a little shorter and less sensual than my wife, she had a warm beauty about her. She was always kind, with a smile that could light up a room, though she kept to herself and dressed conservatively, no doubt because of her past experiences. 4 years into my marriage with Jessica, Lisa's husband, Bill, passed away from a heart attack. It wasn't entirely unexpected, given his health, but Lisa took it really hard. I stepped in to handle all of Bill's estate matters, helped her navigate the aftermath, and did my best to keep her busy with our lives and her charity work. The one thing she refused to entertain was dating again. I knew plenty of men who would have jumped at the chance to be with someone like her, but she just wasn't interested. Everything seemed steady until, shortly after Jessica and I celebrated our 6th wedding anniversary, my world fell apart. I discovered that Jessica had been unfaithful. As much as I wanted to be blind to the signs, once I confirmed what was going on, I couldn't stay. I immediately packed my bags and moved into a long-term motel. I didn't waste any time either. I sorted out our finances and started planning for divorce. Jessica acted like I was blowing everything out of proportion. She claimed her affair didn't mean anything and that I was overreacting. Maybe she truly did love me at one point, but the fact she couldn't even grasp the damage she'd done told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't going to be the guy who stayed and looked the other way. 3 days after I left, I got a surprise visitor at the motel, Lisa. I hadn't expected her, but she seemed genuinely concerned, so I let her in. We sat on the worn-out couch in that little room, and she gently took my hand, looking at me with those green eyes of hers. "I'm so sorry, Nick," she said, her voice soft. "I never raised Jessica to be like this." I squeezed her hand, appreciating the support. "I know, Lisa. This isn't your fault. How are you holding up?" I asked, knowing she was caught in the middle of it all. She sighed, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "It's been tough. But I'm managing," she said. "What about you?" It was a shock, I admitted, but I'm not one to sit around feeling sorry for myself. I moved out. "I'll get through it." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think there's any chance you might forgive Jessica? Maybe try to work things out." I wasn't sure how to answer, but I knew I couldn't lie to her. "I really don't know," I said, feeling a tear well up in my own eye. "It's hard when she doesn't even think she's done something serious." We talked for what felt like hours, not just about Jessica, but about life in general. When it was time for Lisa to leave, she hugged me, holding on just a little longer than I expected. As she pulled away, she gave me this serious look and said, "I hope that, whatever happens between you and Jessica, you won't cut me out of your life." "Lisa, you'll always have a place in my heart," I reassured her. I felt oddly comforted after she left, but that night, I woke up drenched in sweat from an inappropriate dream about my mother-in-law. I couldn't believe what was happening, but things were about to get even more complicated. A week after I moved out, I filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I wasn't going to drag this out any longer than necessary. I also let the landlord know I was no longer responsible for the apartment. Jessica was furious when she found out, but what did she expect? I couldn't understand why she was so upset. She had been the one to betray me. After knowing me for nearly a decade, she should have realized I don't mess around with things like this. Jessica and her lawyer pulled every trick in the book, including trying to force counseling. The first few months were brutal, but I stuck to my guns. I wasn't about to be manipulated back into a broken relationship. The whole situation might have taken a heavier toll on me if it weren't for a couple of close friends who helped me keep my head on straight. And then there was Lisa. She started calling me regularly, mostly to check on how I was doing. She'd share little stories about her charity work, and we'd meet up for lunch about once a month. Every time we met, she seemed in better spirits, always trying to lift me up with her positivity. It was a nice break from the mess that my life had become. After about 3 months of this new routine, we had a hearing scheduled before a magistrate. Jessica was still pushing for counseling, but my lawyer came prepared. He had managed to get photos of Jessica meeting with the guy she had cheated with, George, at least twice since I moved out. She tried to claim nothing was happening between them anymore, but the judge wasn't buying it. Her request for counseling was denied, and it was clear to everyone in that room that our marriage was on its last legs. The very next day, Lisa called me at work. That was unusual for her, but I didn't mind hearing from her. After some small talk, she got straight to the point. "Nick, I talked to Jessica yesterday, and she's really upset. It seems like the divorce is moving forward pretty quickly, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I confirmed. "My lawyer thinks we'll have everything sorted out in the next few months." Lisa was quiet for a moment before she spoke again. "I figured you might be feeling down, so I wanted to invite you out to dinner on Friday. I know things are awkward right now, but I thought it might be nice to get out." I chuckled. "Dinner sounds good. But won't it be a little weird going out with my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law?" Lisa laughed softly. "Only if you make it weird. Don't worry, I won't wear a disguise or anything." That got me to laugh too. "All right, let's do it. You can pick me up around 7. Friday came, and when Lisa arrived at my place, I was in for a surprise. She looked stunning. Gone were the conservative outfits I'd grown used to seeing her wear. Instead, she showed up in a sleek blouse that dipped just low enough to catch my eye, paired with a short skirt and heels that made her legs look even longer than they already were. Her hair was styled differently, and with light makeup accentuating her green eyes, she looked younger, almost like she was in her 30s, not her early 40s. "Wow, you look incredible," I blurted out before I could stop myself. Lisa smiled, a bit nervous but pleased. "Thank you. The restaurant's pretty upscale, so I figured I should dress up a bit." "Is that a new outfit?" I asked, still a bit in awe. She nodded. "Yeah, I bought a few new things this week. I figured it was time for a change." Dinner was fantastic. Lisa had chosen a place with a dance floor, which I didn't expect. Throughout the meal, her mood was infectious. I hadn't seen her so relaxed and carefree in a long time, and it was almost enough to make me forget about my looming divorce. After dinner, she surprised me again. Instead of just having her usual single glass of wine, Lisa ordered a whole bottle for us. I rarely drink, so I only had a glass, but she went through the rest of it without any hesitation. By the time she finished, she had this mischievous smile on her face and convinced me to join her on the dance floor. The only other times I danced with her were at my wedding and a few occasions afterward. Back then, she was more reserved. Her moves were simple and polite. But that night, she was on fire, full of energy. It caught me off guard, but I couldn't help but enjoy it. We danced for what felt like hours, and when we took a break, I asked her, "Where did you learn to dance like that?" She grinned. "I've been taking lessons for the past year. It helps keep me busy." "Well, you're amazing," I told her, genuinely impressed. "You had the attention of half the guys in this place." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "I didn't notice," she said, but I could tell she was flattered. Just then, a guy came up to us, asking if he could dance with her. It took me a second to realize that, to everyone else, we probably looked like a couple. I wasn't sure what to say, but before I could respond, Lisa laughed and said, "He's joking. But since this is only our second date, I think I'll stick with him for the night." Her playful teasing caught me off guard, and I laughed, watching as the guy sheepishly walked away. After a few more dances, she leaned in close and whispered, "I think I've had enough for one night. Could you take me home? I'm pretty sure I've had too much to drink." I nodded, and we headed back to the car. As we drove, Lisa kept up a stream of conversation, mostly about how much she had enjoyed the night and how she hoped I had too. When we got to her house, she fumbled with her keys, clearly tipsy. I offered to help her inside, and she accepted. Once inside, things took a turn I didn't see coming. As soon as we stepped into Lisa's house, I helped her lock the door, but what happened next was something I hadn't anticipated. Lisa leaned against the wall and let out a nervous laugh before digging into her purse. "I took these off in the bathroom earlier," she said, pulling out a pair of panties and handing them to me. I just stood there, staring at them in disbelief. I was at a complete loss for words. My mother-in-law, well, soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, had just handed me her underwear, and before I could even process what was happening, she did something that made my heart race. With a boldness I'd never seen from her, Lisa dropped her skirt to the floor. "What are you doing?" I stammered, feeling my face turn red. Ignoring my question, she slowly unbuttoned her blouse, revealing her bra underneath. I had always known Lisa was beautiful, but seeing her like this, my mind struggled to keep up with what my eyes were witnessing. Underneath her usual conservative clothes was a body that could turn heads, and at that moment, I couldn't deny how stunning she looked. She walked toward me, her eyes locked onto mine, and started placing soft kisses on my neck and shoulders. "Nick," she murmured, her voice low and full of need, "I've been lonely for so long. I need this." Before I knew it, her hands found their way to my waist, and that was it. My resolve crumbled. Without thinking, I scooped her up in my arms and carried her to the bedroom. My mind screamed that this was a bad idea, that I would regret this the next morning, but my body didn't care. It was too late to stop. That night, things went further than I ever thought possible. Afterward, we lay together in bed, both physically and emotionally spent. Lisa rested her head on my chest, sighing softly. "Please stay the night," she whispered. "I've never woken up next to someone I love before." Love. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't even begun to process what just happened, and now Lisa was telling me she loved me? It was too much, too fast, but as exhausted as I was, I couldn't think clearly. We fell asleep like that, tangled in each other's arms, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I slept deeply, without the stress of the divorce hanging over me. The next morning, I woke up to a feeling I hadn't expected, Lisa's touch. At first, I thought it was just another one of those dreams, but then I realized it wasn't. She was there, very real, and very much in the moment. "Thank you for last night," she said softly, her green eyes locking onto mine. "It was the best night of my life." Her words hit me like a freight train. I wasn't sure what to say, but somehow, I managed to smile back at her. We spent the morning together, lingering in bed far longer than we should have, both of us ignoring the reality outside those walls. After a long, hot shower, yes, together, we sat down for breakfast. Lisa seemed lighter, happier, almost glowing. She hummed to herself as she made eggs, and I couldn't help but be struck by how different she looked. For a brief moment, it felt like we were a normal couple, enjoying a lazy Sunday morning. "Maybe we should do this again sometime," Lisa teased, setting down my plate with a wink. I couldn't tell if she was serious or just caught up in the moment, but I wasn't ready to think about what this really meant. After breakfast, I insisted on helping with the dishes, but she shooed me away with a smile, saying I should relax. Once she was dressed in casual shorts and a blouse, she offered to drive me back to my apartment. I could tell she was nervous, but she kept her usual bright smile. The drive was quiet, with only a few words exchanged about how much fun we'd had the night before. When we pulled up to my place, she hesitated before turning off the car. "Nick," she said, her voice soft, "would you mind if I came in for a bit? I've never actually seen your apartment." "Of course," I replied, a little unsure about where this was going, but I couldn't say no to her. Once inside, we didn't waste much time getting to the bedroom, which wasn't exactly a long journey since my apartment wasn't all that big. Lisa let out a deep breath, like she was finally relaxing, and placed her hands gently on my chest. "Nick," she whispered, "I need to ask you for something." I looked down at her, noticing the vulnerability in her eyes. "What is it, Lisa?" Her hands slid down from my chest, and she bit her lip, a little nervous. "Will you make love to me here, in your bed?" Her request hit me like a punch to the gut. There was something so raw and real in the way she asked, and I could see the mixture of longing and hesitation in her expression. Without even thinking, I nodded. I couldn't resist her. In that moment, all the confusion, all the boundaries we had crossed, seemed to disappear, and I was overcome by the desire to be close to her again. We stumbled back onto the bed, and this time, things felt different, more intense, more connected. The way she responded to my touch, the way she looked at me, It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. When it was over, we lay there side by side, catching our breath, the room still and quiet. Lisa turned her head toward me, her eyes searching mine. "Did you enjoy it?" she asked softly. I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. "Yeah, of course," I said with a grin, "but I don't know if I can handle this on a regular basis. You're exhausting me." She laughed, a sound so light and carefree that it made me forget all the complications of our situation. "Well, I'll give you a break this time," she teased, "but only if you promise we can do it again soon." We stayed in bed a little longer, just talking. She massaged my back, and I returned the favor. After a while, she asked, "Am I keeping you from anything today? I don't want to get in the way." "No, my plans changed after last night," I admitted with a smile. "How about we go to the movies later? We can just have a relaxing day." Lisa's face lit up at the suggestion. "That sounds perfect." "Or," she added, "why don't you come over to my place? I'll cook dinner, and we can watch a movie on my big TV. What do you say?" It didn't take long for me to agree. Spending the evening at her place, away from the chaos of everything else, sounded perfect. "What time should I come over?" I asked. "Let's say 5:30, she suggested. "You can help me chop vegetables, although I'm warning you, I'm not the best cook." I laughed. "Neither am I, but I'm sure we'll manage." The day passed in a blur, and before I knew it, I was at Lisa's house again, chopping vegetables in her kitchen. The whole thing felt oddly domestic, like we had fallen into some kind of easy rhythm. After dinner, we didn't even finish the movie before we ended up on the couch, tangled in each other's arms. That weekend was something out of a dream. We spent most of our time together, cooking, talking, even sneaking in a workout at the health club she frequented. By Sunday, we were hiking in a nearby forest, and things between us just felt natural. At one point, we ended up in the back seat of my car, laughing like teenagers before things heated up again. Even as crazy as it was, I couldn't deny how good it felt to just let go. But by Monday morning, reality started creeping back in. We were back at her place, having breakfast, when Lisa suddenly got quiet. I could tell something was on her mind. "Nick," she began, her voice shaky, "there's something I need to say." I put down my coffee, my heart sinking a bit. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she reached out to take mine. "I need to tell you how I really feel about everything before this goes any further." I squeezed her hand, giving her a reassuring nod. "Okay. I'm listening." She sighed and launched into what sounded like a carefully rehearsed confession. "I've been in love with you since the day we met," she said softly. "You're the only man I've ever truly loved." Her words hit me hard. I didn't know what to say, and she continued, explaining that she knew our situation was complicated, especially with the age difference and the fact that I had been married to her daughter. She told me she understood if I didn't feel the same way, and that a long-term relationship between us might be impossible. "I know I can't give you the family and the future you probably want," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I'll take whatever you're willing to give me. I'll always be here for you, no matter what." I was speechless. Lisa was laying her heart bare, and I didn't know how to respond. All I could do was nod, holding her hand as she poured out her feelings. When she finally finished, she smiled through her tears and kissed me softly on the lips. "Go to work," she whispered, "and don't worry about me." I nodded, still too overwhelmed to speak, and left her house with my mind in turmoil. The next couple of weeks were a whirlwind of confusion and emotional chaos for me. Whenever I wasn't buried in work or hanging out with friends, my mind kept circling back to Lisa. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about what we'd done, and about the future. Every night, I dreamed of her, sometimes making love, other times traveling together, or simply holding each other. The dreams were so vivid, so real, and I couldn't escape them, even when I was awake. Lisa and I kept in touch during those 2 weeks, but she never pressured me. She kept things light, never bringing up what she had confessed. In one conversation, she casually mentioned that Jessica had asked her if she was seeing anyone. "You look happier than you've been in years, Mom," Jessica had told her. Lisa just laughed when she recounted the conversation to me, admitting that she had dodged the question. Eventually, I couldn't take the distance anymore. 2 weeks after our talk, I invited Lisa over for dinner at my place. I didn't have a specific plan for the night, but I knew I needed to see her again, to try to figure out what was really going on between us. That Saturday night, we spent hours talking and laughing, and it didn't take long for us to end up in bed again. The connection between us was undeniable, and by the end of the night, I realized I was falling for her. Deeply. But the complications kept weighing on me, the age difference, the fact that she was still my ex-wife's mother. It was hard to see a clear path forward. Despite my confusion, our relationship managed to survive the final stages of my divorce from Jessica. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I knew it was the right decision. After everything, Jessica and I couldn't be in the same room without tension hanging in the air. Shortly after the divorce was finalized, Lisa and Jessica went on a week-long cruise. When Lisa returned, she told me the trip had helped Jessica a lot. She's finally starting to accept that our marriage ending wasn't all my fault, Lisa explained. I think she's even starting to understand how her actions led to this. That night, I asked Lisa the question that had been on my mind for weeks. Did Jessica ask if you were seeing anyone? Lisa hesitated, then nodded. She did. And what did you say? I pressed, my heart racing a little. After a long pause, Lisa sighed. I told her I was happy, but I wasn't sure if this would turn into something long-term. I didn't want to introduce her to you yet, just in case. I couldn't blame her for being cautious. Our situation was delicate, and I still wasn't sure how it would all play out. My indecision might have dragged on for months, maybe even years, if it hadn't been for what happened next. It was a Friday afternoon, just a couple of weeks after Lisa had returned from the cruise. We had plans to go to a play that night, and I was looking forward to spending more time with her. But then, out of nowhere, she called me at the office, her voice shaky and panicked. Nick, I need you to come over. Please. It's urgent. My heart dropped. I had never heard her sound like that before. I left work early and rushed over to her house. When I arrived, she opened the door, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Without a word, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I held her close, letting her cry until the tears slowed down. Lisa, what's going on? I asked, gently guiding her to the couch. She wiped her eyes, her hands trembling as she struggled to speak. Nick, I swear I didn't plan this. I didn't even think it was possible. Possible? I repeated, my mind racing. What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, her voice barely a whisper. I'm pregnant. Time seemed to freeze. The room went silent except for the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Pregnant? How could that even be? Lisa had told me she couldn't have any more children after Jessica. She had made it clear from the beginning that she didn't think pregnancy was an option. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said, but the shock must have been all over my face. Lisa, thinking I was upset, started crying again, harder this time. Please don't hate me, she sobbed. I didn't plan this. I didn't even think it could happen. But I understand if you want to leave. Hearing those words snapped me out of my daze. I grabbed her hands, pulling her closer and wiping away her tears. Lisa, stop. I'm not going anywhere. Her sobs quieted, but her eyes searched mine, desperate for reassurance. You mean that? Yes, I said firmly. I love you, Lisa. I've been fighting it, trying to make sense of everything, but I can't keep running from it. I want to be with you. I want this baby. Her tears slowed as she processed my words, a look of disbelief crossing her face. You want this? I nodded, cupping her face in my hands. More than anything. Will you marry me? For a second, she didn't react. Then, as my words sank in, a smile broke through her tears. Yes, of course I will, she whispered, throwing her arms around me. We kissed, and for the first time in months, everything felt right. Just as we were holding each other, the front door creaked open, and a voice called out from the hallway. Mom, are you here? It was Jessica. Lisa and I froze, turning toward the door just in time to see Jessica walking into the living room. Her eyes widened in confusion as she saw us together, her face going pale. What's going on? She asked, her voice trembling. Before I could even try to explain, Lisa blurted out, I'm pregnant with Nick's baby, and we're getting married. Jessica's expression shifted from confusion to shock, and then to something else entirely. She looked at me, then back at her mother, disbelief and betrayal written all over her face. I saw her knees buckle, and I barely caught her before she fainted. I carried her to the couch, laying her down gently as Lisa rushed to get some smelling salts. As Jessica started to come to, Lisa turned to me and said, "Maybe you should go. I'll call you later." I nodded, knowing this wasn't the moment to stick around. I kissed Lisa goodbye and left, my mind racing as I walked to my car. Later that night, Lisa called to tell me Jessica would be staying with her for the weekend. They had a lot to talk about, and Lisa wanted to give her time to process everything. I understood. This was a huge bombshell for her, and it was only natural that she'd need time to adjust. In the months that followed, Jessica gradually came to terms with our relationship. Though we never regained the friendship we once had, we maintained a civil, respectful distance. As for me and Lisa, we got married in a small, intimate ceremony 2 months before our daughter, Emma, was born. Our love only grew stronger with time, and we eventually welcomed another child, a son named Ethan, through a surrogate. Our life together has been more fulfilling than I ever imagined, and despite the challenges we faced along the way, I've never regretted a single moment. Now, every day I wake up next to Lisa, grateful for the unexpected path our lives took. And as for Jessica, she found her own happiness, marrying a man she truly loves and starting a family of her own. Life may have thrown us some curveballs, but in the end, everything worked out exactly as it was meant to. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.